I was part of the most elite, well-trained unit in the United States Navy for almost 10 years. It's not the Navy SEALs, my friend, it's the Navy Band. So at this point, I'd been in the Navy Band for almost a year, and we had been traveling around quite a bit. You've heard some of my sea stories so far. And the geographical area that we were starting to travel in mostly, I found, was, starting, if you look at a map, Japan's kind of up there in the northeast part of the area that we were in. And, you travel a bit down, and you have the Philippines is maybe right in the middle of all the countries that we visited on a regular basis. And that's probably why we visited that place the most. And, further south, all the way down there was Australia. It was so far, and I had yet to visit Australia at this point. And kind of right in the middle as well, the Philippines was a hopping off point, as well as Hong Kong. China is a giant country. Look at geographically, it's such a huge area. And Hong Kong's way down at the bottom of it, but that was right in the middle of the area that we would travel to the most. And I think it was just convenient to stop in Hong Kong, so a lot of our trips we were headed somewhere else, but in this particular case, we had a pretty cool gig lined up, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the actual gig, the boss, we were coming back from another country, and he said, "Oh, guys, you got the really coolest gig coming up. The whole band's going. I'm going with you. We're going to go and play at the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens." And growing up in a small Texas town, I really didn't give too much thought to sports that were outside of the United States, and even sports regionally outside of the Texas area. And of course, that meant American football, for the most part, was the biggest thing when I was a kid. And my local high school, they had a massive football team. I'm talking a stadium that held thousands of people. It was ridiculous. And the other sport would probably be baseball, which I love. But, I'd never really seen rugby before, didn't know anything about the rules. But it seemed pretty fun. We all flew out to Hong Kong, and usually at this point, the boss did not travel with us too often. He was an officer. He stayed back in Japan and did paperwork and scheduled our gigs and things like that. But, this was a pretty big deal, so the boss came with us, and we were going to do marching. We had at that point been playing pretty exclusively big band music for dignitaries and dances, but this time we had to put on our uniforms, and we were going to march and go onto the field during one of the halftime shows. And so we flew into Hong Kong, and at that time it was really fun to fly in Hong Kong. Fun for me, at least, because maybe I liked a little more adventure. When you flew into Hong Kong, you came right through all the high-rise buildings. I mean, you flew down and you could see people in their office working on their typewriters, So we kind of came down, flew in, and at that point, Scott Davenport was our chief, and he had been in, I think, 2 accidents at that point on planes flying in the Navy. And so he was absolutely terrified of flying, and every time we came into Hong Kong, poor Scott would be over there just white-knuckled holding on to his chair. So, we flew through the buildings, we flew in, and as usual, we went right to HMS Tamar, where the British Navy was. And so, as was the tradition back in those days, the band, we flew in, we'd have someone pick up all our gear, and we would normally be picked up by someone in the embassy, or possibly the British Navy guys would come pick us up. We'd go over to Tamar, and it was a really nice complex. They had a soccer field outside, and up in one of the floors, they had a very nice enlisted club. So like old school wooden bar. It looked like you were in England. And, they would start pouring pints. The damn British Navy liked to drink. So, whenever we flew in, even if it was 10 in the morning, we'd almost always have someone in the Navy go, "Oh, it's the band. You guys come on in and have a beer." Yeah, and so on this trip, it was pretty nice. We got in, and I think we had 2 days before the gig. So had a couple of days to hang out and party in Hong Kong. And, it was a very vibrant scene back then. Lots of bars all over the place. And, of course, we would, do our drinking where it was real cheap on the Navy base with the British guys. And I got to know a lot of the British dudes. They were really nice, and they loved to drink. I mean, a lot of days, they'd be knocking off work at noon and they'd already start drinking. So they're fun to be around, and they took very good care of us. Usually we'd go out as a group with a band and some Brit guys, and they had a favorite bar that we would go to and hang out. And, that first night we got in there, and of course we went out, and I was with the Navy, and as I was walking around, I had some guy come up to me, and he must have heard my accent, and he had a bald head, and he started asking me about the United States and what I was doing there and all that, and I got an uneasy feeling about him, and he was a pretty big dude as well, and kind of out of nowhere, he just headbutted me right in the nose, and it stunned me. I just kind of fell back somewhere. My Navy buddies were not right next to me at the moment, so someone else was staying there, saw it. They kind of caught me and were like, what the fuck? What's going on? And that guy just walked away, just turned around and walked out of the club. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what just happened. And I almost in shock there for a moment, and I could feel I had a bunch of blood dripping down my nose at that point. So sure enough, I kind of found my buddies. I was like, what the hell? I was just talking to this guy, and he totally headbutted me out of the blue. And they're like, what? Oh, where is he? Where's he? And we kind of got up, and at that point, the Brits had also said, hey, what's going on? Oh, Hank, what the fuck happened to your nose? And I told him, hey, this random dude. And so it was a skinhead. I guess he didn't like the fact that the U.S. Navy was in Hong Kong and just picked me out of the blue. And that was my first and only bar fight, if you could call it a bar fight. So my nose was so messed up, and I was already outrageously drunk being with the Brits all day. So I go back. They said, go back to Tamar and go to the doctor, and they'll take care of you. So I stumble back to the base. Who knows? It may have been like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. So I stumble back to the base. I show them my military ID. I get on base. They tell me where the doctor is, and I walk down there, and no one's in the office at the moment. So I wait a minute. Finally, a doctor comes out, but he doesn't speak English for the most part. He's speaking Chinese to me, and I'm trying to tell him I'm with the U.S. Navy band, and we're staying here on Tamar, and I had an incident. I think my nose is broken. Can you help me? And he said, oh, no, we can't help you. Go away. Basically, like, get out of my office. You're bleeding all over my stuff. I was like, wait, I'm with the Navy band. And he said, no, go away. Come back tomorrow, basically. He was like, no, go away. And so I left. I was still kind of bleeding out of my nose. It was so painful. And I ended up walking back, and I just kind of wrapped some T-shirts and stuff around my nose, and I laid down on my rack there at Tamar. And eventually all the guys came back at who knows what time in the morning. And when I woke up in the morning, I had blood all over the place. I still felt obviously terrible, especially after the alcohol wore off. And so the guys walked me back to the clinic, and the previous night, the doctor had written down something about a naval bank. He thought I was a civilian, so he couldn't treat me. And long story short, I ended up having a broken nose. They reset it there. And then so that kind of plays into the next part of the story where we go play for the rugby sevens. And so, we had a little bit of time off that day. Our gig for the rugby sevens wasn't until the late afternoon. And since we were marching, we didn't have a lot of gear to move with us. So, I think we ended up meeting about 2 p.m. And of course, when we all mustered together, everyone saw how terrible I looked with my nose, and everybody wanted to know what happened. So I kind of told them the story. And nonetheless, we go off to the stadium. And as we get to the stadium, just as we get there, the U.S. team is hanging out. They were called the Eagles back then. And so the Eagles were really good guys. They had been traveling around with all these different countries. as part of an exhibition. And so they were happy to see us out of the military there. And they gave each of us a jersey for the U.S. Eagles. So it's pretty cool. You know, we all put on our jerseys at that point over our dress white uniforms and walked around the stadium for a little while. And then, of course, I had my broken nose and I had my jersey. And back then, all the people in the stadium, they wanted the players to sign their jerseys. So even though I had my dress whites on underneath it, you know, I had that jersey on top and my nose was all bloody. So I think everyone assumed I was a rugby player. And I ended up, funny enough, signing autographs on some of the American Eagles jerseys. So if you have an American Eagle jersey from 1991 Hong Kong Sevens, you might see my name on there. And, you know, really playing in front of all the people in the stadium, it was really exhilarating. You know, there were tens of thousands of people in the stadium, and we marched out in our dress whites, and the band wasn't all that big. At that time, we had taken everybody, including the boss, so we probably had just over 20 people marching, trombones and saxophones and trumpets and drums and all that. But with that many people in the stadium, it probably wasn't all that loud, but everyone went nuts. And of course, we had the color guard came out with us, and that was some U.S. Navy guys with flags, and they marched around with us. And overall, it was an amazing experience. That's probably the most people I'd ever played for at that point. And, you know, it just a real big party. And after we finished the gig, of course, all the Brits wanted to hang out and party with us. So we re-hooked up with some of our Brit friends at Tamar after the gig and did some more drinking. And that's when I ran into some of my mates in the Ghurkas. So it just so happens on this trip to Tamar, there was a contingent of British Ghurkas there. And so the Ghurkas are a very elite band in the British Navy and Army, and they're recruited from Nepal. And so legend has it that they go, and back in the day they would recruit them, and one of the things they had to do was run up and down these mountains with big sacks of rocks on their back. And basically whoever didn't quit could join the Ghurkas. And then they became famous in World War II, I believe it was, where they had these curved knives, and that was the thing. You don't want to get captured by the Ghurkas, and they'd cut your balls off that they got you. So they were really hardcore, like trained out in the desert, and just badasses in general. Yeah, so that was the last night of our trip there in Hong Kong. We were flying out the next day, and you know, we went back to Tamar, ran into the Ghurkas, and of course, once they heard my story, you know, they felt bad that had happened at basically their club that they hang out at, you know. So they all thought, you know, fuck this guy, let's go, and we are going to bash his head in tonight. So I thought, all right, great, this dude's going to get payback. And, you know, so we go back to their club, and, you know, of course, with the Brits, we get outrageously drunk at this bar. And the whole time, I'd never been in a fight. So I started taking beer bottles, and every time I drank a bottle of beer, I would keep the bottle, and I was putting it under the table by my chair. Because I just thought, if this guy comes back in and he rushes me or something, I'm just going to start breaking bottles over his head, you know. So, and I thought, I've got all these Ghurkas as my backup tonight. He won't know that. So, you know, kind of anticipation, and we get in the club and got really drunk. And of course, at the end of the night, the guy never shows up. That's probably a good thing, because I think the Ghurkas and my buddies in the British Navy would have, like, torn him to shreds. Yeah, and so that was the end of another trip of many to come. You know, I spent so much time in Hong Kong and had a great time there. Really, really loved the Brits. Had such a wonderful time partying with them on Tamar and all around Hong Kong. And hey, folks, I'll see you next time. Fair winds and following seas.